The Jazz lost a close one in LA to the Clippers Friday night, but as losses go, this one wasn't really bad at all. The Jazz stood toe-to-toe with a consensus title contender and easily could have won with a few more made shots or a few less mistakes here and there. The Clippers clearly had something to prove in this one with their full roster healthy, and the Jazz responded well to that challenge despite the loss. I also think it's a distinct positive that Quin Snyder and his staff got a nice long look at what might be a playoff trump card for the Clippers, a 5-wing lineup featuring no traditional big man. LA ran this configuration for the bulk of the fourth quarter, including the Apex version featuring Pat Beverly, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Morris, and Nick Batum. This group separated from the Jazz once George came on the floor with 5:30 left to play in the fourth quarter. As you can see from these graphs via inpredictable.com, the Clippers' win probability jumped from 63% when George entered the game to 99.9% just 3 minutes later. There's no question this lineup confused the Jazz and presented some problems, but as Quin Snyder and his staff will be breaking down every nuance to figure out how to counter it if the Jazz see LA in the playoffs, we'll do the same here on Jazz Film Room. What can the Jazz do differently next time? The first big problem this lineup creates for the Jazz is the way it preys on the well-intentioned tendencies of Jazz big men in their traditional defense. Notice the low shot clock on this play as Beverly drives. Donovan Mitchell and Royce O'Neal have this covered, doing a good job to switch late without giving anything up. But it's the natural instinct of Derek Favors to be helping down on this, meaning he leaves Morris, a blistering 50% three-point shooter this season, open for a bailout triple. Here's another with the same theme. The Clippers know the Jazz don't want to switch their centers on most pick and rolls, and Morris does a nice job here changing the pick direction to catch Mitchell and force separation. Favors, again, rightly comes over to help, but when Donovan also pursues the ball handler, it's another open three. The Jazz got lucky that this one missed, actually. Here's another, with Favors frankly not making a good enough effort to recover here. This next one comes with Gobert back in the game. The Clippers were targeting Bojan Bogdanovic with a bunch of their picks, and here they get the switch onto George. I actually think Bogey did okay on this play though, and has decent position on George as he picks his dribble up. But given the deep position PG has, you kinda can't blame Gobert for dropping in to help out. But again, he's overcompromised and no other Jazz players have rotated, leaving Beverly, another extremely capable shooter, wide open in the corner. When the Jazz showed some flexibility on their switching, it created other problems. We picked this clip up right as Favors and Mitchell have conceded this switch, putting Favors on PG, but Fav isn't able to stay vertical on his contest and ends up taking a foul here. The Jazz put out one fire by preventing the easy three, but created another in the process. Here's another, where the Clippers are clearly targeting Bogdanovic again now that Gobert's back on the floor. Again, Bogey does about all you can expect from him here. He just doesn't really have the length or athleticism to bother George, who also gets a nice bounce on this play on the rim. This isn't even a terrible shot for the Jazz to give up, but the shot-making talent of LA's wings illustrates just how tough the Clippers can make things. Could guys like Favors and Bogdanovic hold up against these lineups in a playoff crucible? Now, it's far from all doom and gloom for Utah. For one, several of the plays we've just gone over still did require some solid individual playmaking on the Clippers side, even despite the Jazz's imperfections that we looked at. For another, while it came too little too late, we did see a clear example in this game of how the Jazz can defend this alignment without compromising their principles. It'll just take some precision on their end. As you can see here, the Clips are setting up to run two-man action with George and Batum, guarded by Mitchell and Gobert respectively. The first nice play here is by Mitchell, who sees that this pick is too high up on the floor for PG to pull up from three, plus that Batum isn't really setting a great screen, so Mitchell goes under and stays mostly in front of George. But PG is a strong guy with a big height advantage on Mitchell, and he wedges his way to the basket anyway, so as you see, this is good recognition from Rudy to help down. The real secret sauce here, though, is what's happening off the ball. As George picks up his dribble and looks for the kickout pass he knows is open now that Gobert has dropped down, Bogdanovic is already sprinting toward that open man in rotation. Meanwhile, Mike Conley is doing a perfect job of guarding two, as the term goes, staying just between the two remaining LA shooters on the wing, ready to leap whichever way the pass from Batum goes. Meanwhile, as the pass goes to Morris on the wing, Gobert knows his job isn't done on this play. Bogdanovic and Conley have covered for him, and now he has to recover behind them. This is another savvy little move here from Conley, by the way, putting himself in the way of the final swing pass to the corner to allow Rudy more time, while simultaneously priming to contest Morris if he does go up to shoot. That gives Gobert enough time to recover, and now the Jazz have ended the advantage and swung this possession in their favor. The shot clock is down to 5, and LA has to settle for a contested Morris mid-ranger while the Jazz have bodies in rebounding position. It's a defensive success. So all that's pretty simple, right? Of course it's not. Look back at how many distinct moles the Jazz had to whack in a single sequence just to shut down LA here, and that Morris shot nearly dropped regardless. Defending lineups like these, with this much talent, will take that level of execution on a regular basis. Some of the best defenses in the NBA honestly might not be capable. It's one of the tasks that might face the Jazz if they want a ring this year. There were also several situations that boiled down to battle winning when evaluating the success the Clippers had in this 5-wing lineup Friday. We picked this possession up with the Jazz narrowly holding on to a sliver of hope in the game, down 10 with 2.5 to play. As this Beverly shot is going up, though, notice Conley miss Batum, his man, sneaking by him for rebounding position with no box out. It's then Batum who taps this ball back out, and seconds later, any of that minuscule Jazz hope is now gone.
It's in the hands of Morris.
See another second chance opportunities.
Beverly steps into one, swishes it home. The lead is back to 13.
Here's another. The Jazz do well to contest Kawhi here, but Leonard then beats both Gobert and O'Neal to the offensive board. The Clippers back it out here. Kawhi drives again on O'Neal. And once again, Gobert does a good job coming over to help, and the Jazz get a bit lucky for a miss, but again, Kawhi ends up with the rebound in traffic. You just can't give up these kinds of backbreakers to lineups without any actual big men on the floor. The Jazz will have to clean that up, plain and simple. A few notes also on the offensive side of the ball, where the Jazz also had a few issues against the LA 5-wing lineup, but issues that to me are even simpler fixes than the ones on the defensive side. The Jazz have done just fine against switching D and various hybrids all year, and I don't really see anything to make me think they aren't capable of that against the Clippers as well. Some of their issues were simple missed shots, but we also saw a few examples of them letting LA off the hook in simple areas. This play here is a good example. Mitchell has turned the corner on this drive and clearly has the advantage needed to create problems for the Clippers rumbling down the lane. A good stunt from George maybe surprises Donovan a bit here, forcing him to pick his dribble up, but even as we freeze it here, it certainly looks like Mitchell has the momentum to attack the rim strong. Remember, there's no center on the court for LA. At minimum, putting max pressure on the rim likely forces help and leaves open either Gobert at the rim or Bogdanovich in the corner. But instead, Mitchell settles for a floater that's not only a lower percentage shot than any of these, but also creates no rotation for the D and doesn't even generate any contact for potential free throws. On a different possession, Mitchell's aggression level is perhaps dialed up a bit too much. He has less of an advantage here than in the last play, but does attack the rim, though is a bit out of control. We've seen Donovan make these kinds of shots plenty, and I'm not saying it's a terrible take. The egregious part, though, is how Don misses Conley wide open in the corner here. This is just an uncharacteristic mistake from Mitchell, who's been finding that pass regularly this year. He might have been a bit uncomfortable against this particular configuration, which he had not seen before. Expect him to be making the right read more often if he sees it again. Finally, a quick word on the one Jazz player who's pretty clearly most important against these kind of lineups, and who they're clearly designed against, Rudy Gobert. I make no secret of the fact that my expectations for Rudy are high, as they are within the franchise, and I think even he'd admit he can be better than he was on Friday night. Against these small lineups, the Jazz need him in full beast mode, attacking the glass, keeping the ball high, and forcing the Clippers to dedicate multiple bodies to him. Too often, though, he wasn't forceful enough to my eye on Friday. Watch here how Gobert, who was maybe getting a bit frustrated by this point, outright two-hand shoves Morris just a few feet from the baseline referee. It's just a silly play. No one says Rudy has to be Joel Embiid out there on the block, but he has to be willing to bend his knees, lower his center of gravity, and use the legal means available to him, plus of course his significant size edge in matchups like these, to create space. Between some Snyder scheming and a bit more force from Rudy, I'm betting he'll also be better if the Jazz see this unit again. All told, the takeaway from the Jazz's first look at this sort of unique lineup from a truly elite team this season is mostly positive from my end. There's some very simple low-hanging fruit they can pick to improve, both in terms of scheme and focus. The mere fact that Snyder has seen this offense and can drill against it is no small deal should these teams meet come playoff time. That's not to say it won't be a challenge. It definitely will, because these are very good players, but the Jazz should be ready for it at the very least. Thanks so much for your support. If you'd be willing, please recommend me to any friends, family, or others who you think would enjoy Jazz Film Room.